Okay, great. Hopefully this works. You hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Today is Daf. Today is Yud Tes. Yes, that is correct. Okay, we are in the middle of talking about P Tikra, Yud V'Seisim. P Tikra means when you have a roof and you have an edge on your roof, so you can say P Tikra Yud V'Seisim, and you can we visualize as if the edge of that roof, you have a flat edge, that edge comes down. And yesterday we saw a chiluk between we saw chiluk between whether, meaning Rava was saying that P Tikra Yerd V'Seisim only works if you're saying it for the area that it is it's containing. But if you need P Tikra Yerd V'Seisim for the area that the Tikra does not contain, but outside that area, then Rava said you don't say P Tikra Yerd V'Seisim. So again, if you have an achsadra, so I have an overhang, right? So that roof of that overhang is containing the area underneath it. So if I need P Tikra Yerd V'Seisim, if I need that wall to contain the area underneath the achsadra, so Rava says then you would say P Tikra Yerd V'Seisim. But if what I need the wall for is for outside the achsadra, there Rava says you don't say P Tikra Yerd V'Seisim, and Abaye says you do. Abaye says you always say P Tikra Yerd V'Seisim. Rava says we only say P Tikra Yerd V'Seisim when that function of P Tikra is being utilized to service the area under the roof. If it's being utilized to service the area outside the roof, he says we don't say P Tikra Yerd V'Seisim.
So in our case, for the sukkah,
so in the case of the sukkah, he says you wouldn't say P Tikra Yerd V'Seisim because the roof is for the area which is for the area under the walkway, and you want the area. You need the wall for your area in the chutzner, which you put schach on top of. So therefore, Rabbi would say there you wouldn't say P Tikra Yerd V'Seisim, and Abaye says you do. All right, that's what we said until now. Now we have a very big kasha on Abaye. Abaye who says P Tikra Yerd V'Seisim for an achsadra. We have a Meforish Mishnah that says not like him. So we're going to start on the top of the Testament Aleph, the word Tanan. 4 lines down, third word in. Tanan, learned in a Mishnah. Similarly, a chatzah that is surrounded by an achsadra, and you put up schach in between, and the Mishnah says if it's 4 amas away, it doesn't work. Why don't we say P Tikra Yerd V'Seisim? V'amai name it P Tikra Yerd V'Seisim. Targuma Rava Aliba Dabaya is one of my favorite lines in Shas. Whenever the Gemara has such a line like this, because it just shows the honesty that the Amoraim, the intellectual honesty that Rava says I can answer up. I can say pshat for Abaye. It means even if Abaye didn't have a good pshat, but Rava says it's not a good kasha, and I'll tell you pshat why the Mishnah can make sense according to Abaye. So Targuma Abaye Rava Aliba Abaye. Rava explained the Mishnah according to Abaye, and it says as follows: Kishehishva eskiruyav. Okay, so here's another halacha we're going to learn about P Tikra Yerd V'Seisim. P Tikra Yerd V'Seisim only works if you can see the edge of the roof. Okay, from wherever you are. But in the case of the Mishnah, says a Rava, the case is that your schach that you put up is not resting on top of the achsadra, but it's flush against the achsadra. It's flush. So therefore, your schach goes right into the, let's say, yeah, let's get some visuals here. I know. Okay. Here's our achsadra. Okay? Put it like this. Here's the achsadra. Okay, and here you put up your schach. So I was always under the assumption that the schach was resting on top of the echsadra. So this area here was, you'd say pi tikra on yered v'seisim. Kishehish v'kiruyav means we're putting the schach up like this, right flush against the tikra, and therefore there's no pi tikra, there's no edge of the tikra to say yered v'seisim on, because the schach is going against it. So where the schach is flush, is against the pi tikra, that means I just extended my roof. So I don't have a pi tikra, I don't have an edge anymore. You can't say yered v'seisim. So Abai says, Rava says that is what the Mishnah would be talking about according to Abai, and that's why in the Mishnah there is no din of pi tikra yered v'seisim. Gishmak. Okay. Now this is how they learned this machlokes is Abai and Rava b'sura masi lahashmaitz b'hai lishna. That's how it was learned in Surah. The Pumpadisa masni they learned differently. And meaning this machlokes in Abai and Rava was taught differently in Pumpadisa. So let's see what they said in Pumpadisa. If you put schach over your chutzner using the achsadra, and there were no columns, so there's no lavud, everybody agrees that that's pasul. Yesh la psimin, if there are columns, Abaya Amr Keshera, Rava Amr Psula. Right, which means what it sounds like we're saying here is that here nobody says Pitikra. Everybody agrees that we're not going to say Pitikra V'Saisim when the wall that you want to visualize is being used Michutzala. It's not being used for underneath the Tikra. So what's the machlokes here? When I have pitzim, when I have columns that are within 3 tvachim of each other, will I say lavud? So Abaya Amar Kashera, Amrin and lavud. Rava Amar Psula, Loy Amrin and lavud. Now, why in the world wouldn't you say lavud? Well, we always say lavud when you have something within 3 tvachim. So Rashi explains for a similar svar we've been saying for Tikra. Rava Amar Psula, Rashi is about a little more than halfway down the page. Rava Amar Psula, the Lavad Lav Mechitzahi. Lavad is not really a mechitza. It's learned that we could say lavad to make a mechitza. When was Allah taught to make a mechitza? For the space that these petzim were put up for. But to use it for both spaces, that you can't say. Meaning that love, we would only say lavud. Again, if I put up these columns for the area that was underneath the roof. So that's the area the columns are put up for. That's what the wall is functioning for the inside. So to say lavud for that, you would say, okay, that I could do. But to say that it should function for the outside of this wall, that you don't say. We'd only say, this is what Rava's Shita and Pumpadisa was, that lavud is only said for the area inside the wall, not for the area outside the wall. Here we want it to put up because we're putting up a sukkah.
Is that you want the inside?
No, I put up my sukkah from where the achsadra ended to the other side of the achsadra. So the columns coming down on this achsadra.
It's inside the sukkah.
Yeah, but the columns weren't put up for the chutzner. They were put up for underneath this achsadra.
So it wasn't put up for the sukkah.
Correct.
So what?
So he's saying the din of the din, the lavud is again. It's not a real machitza here. If you have a real machitza, so then it works for both sides. Here I'm making a machitza. It's a halachic machitza. The halachic machitza is only for the inside and not for the outside. That's what Rava holds. According to
the Shita, that means that you can't use an existing broken up structure. That was
exactly. You can't use it exactly. If that was lavud, you wouldn't be able to use it. Right. Yes, correct. Says the Gemara. That's interesting. Yeah, the Gemara says v'hilchasa kalishna kam. The halacha follows surah that the machlekes is by pitikra. Lavud everybody holds. You can say the machlekes is only by pitikra. Abai said you would say pitikra, and Rava says you don't. How do we paskin? So the halacha is when you have machlekes Abaye and Rava, The machlekes we paskin like Rava, except in Yalakagam, and this is not one of the exceptions. So we would paskin like Rava, which would mean P-tikra can only be used for the area underneath the tikra. It can't be used michutzala. But Lavid is always said. Right? Once you have an area less than 3 tvachim, Lavid will be said. Okay. We are holding about 10 lines down on Chayutas Amar Aleph. You with me, Shimon?
Yes, but
Ravashi.
We just said the part, the psula, Lavid.
That's the Lashon of Basra.
That was what?
That's the second Lashon. That was in Pumpadisa.
Yeah.
The Gemara is Paskin Behilchas like Lashon Kama. The halacha follows the first reading, which is like surah, and therefore we paskin that love it always works. The machlekes is by pitikra, and there we would paskin like Rava that it doesn't work by, in our case, of sukkah. Okay. Rav Ashi Ashkel Rav Kahana the Mesachech Gabi Asadra Shein Lapatzimin. Rav Ashi found Rav Kahana that he used the nachsadra and he didn't have any columns and he had schach over the chutzner and he was sitting in it, which presumably was a puzzle sukkah. We don't say pitikra. Amar lei several amar hadam Rava yesh lapatzim ksher ein lapatzim psula. Do you not agree to Rava? We pass like Rava. Do you not agree to Rava that if the only time this will be kosher is if there are columns, meaning we don't say pitikra in such an instance? So achvile, he showed to him. He pointed to him. He says, "Nir bi b'fnim v'shava mi b'chutz, inami nir mi b'chutz v'shava mi b'fnim." Okay, here's a scenario where I had 2 walls up. Okay, there are 2 walls, two walls in creating a right angle, and so I have 2 walls, and then I have schach on top, and at a place where the tevach should be, so it was either nira mi b'chutz. That means the tefach went the wrong way, went out of the sukkah, went the wrong way. Okay, that's near mi b'chutz. From the outside, you can see a wall, and the inside you don't see anything. V'shava, that's one scenario, or it was v'shava mi b'chutz, or it was near mi b'fnim. You were able to see it from the inside, but you wouldn't be able to see anything on the outside. Right? That sounds like that should be fine because you see the tefach. You don't need to see it from the outside. But here, where it's near mi b'chutz, he says nidain, that would work. The itman, he brings himself a raya. Near me b'chutz shav miftim. In a scenario where this is talking about a lechi, where you have a mavui. A mavui is 3 walls, an area with 3 walls. So we said at the end of into Rosh Hashanah, you need to put up a lechi. You need to put up a pole. Okay. What if that pole could only be seen nira mi b'chutz? It can only be seen from outside the lechi, from outside the mavui, not from inside. In the inside, it was flush, but if you looked on the outside, you saw like there was something sticking out. Meaning, from the inside, the wall looks like it just continued, but really, let's say the wall was 40 amas, all right, and then there was another amma sticking out, but from the inside, it just looks like it's a 41 amma wall. But from the outside, you see that the thickness of the wall generally was 3 tvachim, and at the edge, it's only a tefach. So you see from the outside that there is a pole there. You just can't see it from the inside. So then is nida mishum lechi. That's a good lechi. V'lechi hainu petzimin, and a lechi is a column. So he wants to say that should work in my sukkah too. So fractasis, that's ridiculous. Fractasis is top of the page. Tema, hey chumaya b'sukkah, kivin d'lei mikra mi b'fnim, shlisha shel tevach. If you don't see your tevach on the inside, you don't have a tevach in your sukkah. You have 2 and a 1. You don't have anything. So what's going on over here? The imi shemugu. Maybe I'll tell you a migu. Migu da havidoifin le'inyan Shabbos, havidoifin le'inyan sukkah. Says Taisus. He says. First of all, the Atumilay Avad of Kahana Sukkah Shabbos. What this was of Kahana Shabbos Sukkah. You know, presumably this was the Sukkah he sat in Agan Siyantiv. Va'ayid the Shlishas Day Raisa Leimahani Migu could the priest's Lael. Midia Raisa here. Sukkah's Raisa. You need to have a Dia Raisa like a wall. You need a tabach. This is not going to work. Mavui was the Rabbanan, so it worked. That's the kash. So the Rush in Simon Lamed gives two tirutzim. The Rush gives two tirutzim. There's a Geshmaka Rush in Simon Lamed. I have here down the second one. He says like this. He says, "You want to look at it? If you want to take a look at it, you can take a look. You guys don't have the Rush. You want to take a look at the Rush? He has the Rush. Take a look at the Rush in the back. In Simon, in the first parak of Simon Lamed Dalet. So he says, his first teretz is, if you're in the towards the end of Simon Lamed Dalet in the Rush, it's on page Tes. If you have a new print of the Rush, it's in page Tes, and it's in towards the bottom of Simon Lamed Dalet, right in the middle. It says, "V'yesh loymar the Ma'iri Kishas Atzuris HaPesach." It's very possible here that we're talking about where there was on the third side, there was a Tzuras HaPesach. L'deifin Ashlishis. Rav Kahana da'achel tamei da'amar la'el. So the reason why Rav Kahana didn't like that is because Rav Kahana said before that you need Tzuras HaPesach and a Tefach Sheichik. And he didn't see the Tefach Sheichik. And it could be that Reb,
What is the Tzuras HaPesach for a wall?
What?
How does that make a wall?
Midiraisa, it works for a wall. Tzuras HaPesach is a wall midiraisa. Midiraisa is sagilei b'hachi. The b'chol makim Tzuras HaPesach chashav k'machitza. V'loi bai tevach sheicheh il merabanan. Hilgoch mahani le'nir mi b'chutz. Therefore, he said that mir mi b'chutz will also work since it works by Shabbos. So we'll allow it to work. Since we find the concept by Shabbos, we'll allow it to work over here also, since we only need a wall midirabanan. That's his first teretz. His second teretz, the Rosh says, Inami, Hadam Rava Loi Mahani Pitikra. Remember, Rava just said that Pitikra doesn't work. Right? Rava said Pitikra, and his kash was Pitikra. Maybe Pitikra only doesn't work midirabanan. Midiraisa avad, the Pitikra works even if you don't need the wall for the inside. This chiluk of well, you need it for the inside, or for the outside is a din dirabanan. But avad the midiraisa Pitikra works. So therefore, since midiraisa, I do have a third wall here. Therefore, here is allowing himself to rely on Yerbi B'chutz, even though you don't see the tefach inside the sukkah, since it's only midrabana now, therefore he allows it in his sukkah.
So why does he say
okay?
that? The Gemara doesn't say that.
Then what fun would we have if the Gemara said that? You know what I mean? That'd be no fun. That's our job.
All
right.
Differently.
He just said near and it's like what? And it's like Shabbos. So we got to fill in the blanks. Okay, now we finally get up to the sugya of Pesel. Tana. I think we have three pshatim here in Pesel. Tana. This is the Bryce. Pesel hayotzim min hasukah. Pesel is kosher schach. Right? It's so ironic. Only in Judaism where we have the word pesel meaning kosher schach. Right? I mean, I remember learning. I don't know what. The first time I saw this word, I know for sure I thought it was pesel. I didn't know what was going on. But pesel is because we don't know chumash. If we know chumash, we would know that it was like the psal sukkah and v'yakim. All right. So pesel hayotzim min hasukah. The kosher schach that comes out from the sukkah, that goes out from the sukkah, nidain kisukah. Period. That's the brisa. Kosher schach that's yotzim min hasukah, nidain kisukah. So, for the Gemara, what in the world does that mean? My pesach yotzim min hasukah. What is the case of the kosher schach going out of the sukkah? We have, I think there are three pshatim here. Amar Ula. Right, and they I'm just letting you know, they start off with not such a chiddush and they get on to big chiddush. So Amar Ula, kanim hayotzim la'achure sukkah. These are the reeds, the kosher schach that come out from the back of the sukkah. Now, what's the back of the sukkah? The back end, our sukkah, a standard sukkah in Gemara sukkah has three walls, two long and one short. Okay, so the achure sukkah is behind the middle wall, behind the short wall. That's called achure sukkah. So you have schach sticking out the back of the sukkah. Okay.
With or without walls?
Amar Ula kan meitzim achure sukkah. Oh, frakti Amara v'beina shalish tefanes. But you need three walls. So if you're behind the sukkah, you don't have any walls. You have one wall. Says the Gemara. Okay, but the ika. We're talking about where there are meaning what? That third wall, you pushed it into the sukkah a little bit. Okay, you pushed the third wall into the sukkah a little bit. I'm saying that shot on purpose. Okay, you took that third wall and you pushed it into the sukkah. Now I have three walls. Okay, so it says sukkah. Good, you have three walls, but I need to have 7 by 7. Okay, B'deika, it is 7 by 7. But okay. You need to have a lot of schach. You can't have a couple twigs hanging over. Versus b'deika, you have it. So in fact, the Gemara, if you have a 7 by 7 and you have a lot of shade and you have 3 walls, so Ma'alam Amra, what's the chiddush? It's a beautiful sukkah. Says the Gemara, I would have thought. Originally, when these walls and sukkah were put up, they were put up for the inside, not to be outside. They were made for the outside. Maybe I would say that they're not good defanis. They're not good walls because they're not made. They weren't made. Right? They were originally made as to be the inside of a sukkah of this sukkah. And now you just pushed the back of the back wall forward, so you created another space. But that wasn't the way I made it originally. So maybe that's not good. That's kosher.
Is that what following the tassel below
No, it's a fine. No tassel. So everything is good.
But that's what you're thinking
Was it tassel? I don't know. It sounds more like this din of mechitzas. That mechitzas need to be for the area that they were designated for. They were made to be to corner off or to protect this area, and now it's not. He's doing something behind it.
Still, what's the chiddush though? It's
that mechitzas that since they're real meaning that would be work maybe for Allah as we wouldn't allow that, but for something which is an actual mechitza, it doesn't make a difference as long as it's prime protection for the area that it's protecting, and even if that wasn't your original intent, it's still kosher. Okay, that's first the first shot that's our first shot in Pesach. Number 2, Rabbi Yosef, they have a different shot. Now the kosher schach is jutting out the other side of the sukkah, lefnim, meaning on the open end. Again, we have a 3-walled sukkah, and the schach is going over past the walls. Right, so it's going further out. It's going further than where the walls end. The schach hangs further. Okay, so the Gemara says. Okay, and it gets dragged out and continues. So one wall goes further than the other wall. So you have 3 walls. There are 2 parallel walls. One goes further, and the schach is going along that wall, continue along the whole width of the sukkah. So it says the Gemara, that's the case of Pesach. So what's the chiddush? Halespa hechsher sukkah. The chiddush meaning, there's no issue there, right? Because you have 2 and a tefach. If one wall goes further than the other wall, okay, so it's still 2 and a tefach. You still have 2 walls. When you're sitting in that area, you have a tefach down there. I'm still surrounded by. I'm still in a sukkah of 2 and a tefach. So what's the chiddush here? The chiddush is that in the area that goes past the other wall doesn't have 7 by 7, and therefore it's completely being saimach on the other sukkah.
Well, we know this. There's only one sukkah here you're talking about.
Well, that's the chiddush. That's interesting. Okay, the havamina was like this. The havamina was that being that one wall extends past the other one, so you may look at it as if there are 2 separate sukkahs here, because if I wanted it to be all one sukkah, then I would have extended the other wall as well. So why am I only having the wall go out a little bit? So I'm trying to make a separate sukkah. Mashallah, no, this is considered one sukkah, and you have 2 and a tefach. All right, not so exciting. Third shot, Rav Khan Amr Yochanan. So they have a whole different way to read this. Most of the sukkah, nothing's. You have one regular sukkah. I got a regular sukkah. Nothing's extending outside the sukkah. I have a regular sukkah, and I have and it's still some Chamas. Umiuta, there's part of the sukkah that's chamsim mitzil, so it doesn't have a lot of shade. So the tema tipasel bahach porta. maybe you should pass the sukkah because part of the sukkah is not silas meruba mechamasa. Says the Gemara, Kamash Rolan, that it's not an issue. Right? The Gemara, what does Yaitse mean? Yaitse means sounds like the schach went outside of the sukkah. Gemara says, no, my Yaitse me hechsher sukkah. That I have a part of the sukkah that doesn't have chamsa meruba mitzilasa. And therefore you would have thought that was, since that went out of its kashrus, so maybe that's the possible the sukkah. Kamash Rolan, that it doesn't. Again, so you would have thought that again, you don't have avir. There's no issue of avir of 3 tvachim. You have an area of sukkah which just has very little schach over it, and therefore you would say, listen, I can't sit in that part of the sukkah. Is that possible? The rest of the sukkah, kamash shalom, that it does not. That's number 3. Number 4, fourth pshat. Rav Oishya Amar le'nitzcha el l'schach pasul pachas mishleisha besukkah ketana. This halacha of pesel is referring to schach pasul of less than 3 tvachim in a sukkah katana. So I have a sukkah katana means 7 by 7, and I have I have 4 tvachim of kosher schach and 3 tvachim of pasel schach. So I would have thought that should be pasel. Kamashal, and that's still okay. My yoytze, what does it mean yoytze? Again, it means yoytze mitiras sukkah. Here I have pesel that was yoytze miter sukkah, because the pesel here, because I don't even have a 7 tvachim of kosher schach. Shafilu min kosher ene, Rashi says, because I don't even have. So the Gemara is like, what's the chiddush? Masler Vaisha. Like, what's the chiddush here? Even if you had avir of less than 3 tvachim, you would say love it and it'd be kosher. And we know avir is more chomer than schach pasel because it pasels with less. So like, what's the chiddush? I had 3 tvachim of schach pasel, it's still kosher. What's the big deal? I'm related to Abba. Zeh mitzaref b'yishenim tachtav. Zeh mitzaref ve'en yishenim tachtav. In the case of avir, so you're right, it's mitzaref, but I can't sleep under it. But the pasel schach, I'm able to sleep under. Correct. You can't sleep under the airspace, but you're allowed to sleep under the schach pasel. How could you have something like that? That it could be mitzaref to the shear, but if it itself is pasel? Says Gemara, yeah, in Titanaruk, top of your tasam the bays. Titanaruk yechiach. Tit is mortar, it's mud, but it's naruk, it's liquidy mud. So I guess it's slimy. It's whatever. It's liquidy. So what's the halacha? Shem mitzaref laboim sa. It's mitzaref to 40. So let's say you have a mikvah that you're going to be table in a lake, or you're in whatever your mikvah was in a bar, and it was rained. I don't know. There was slimy in there. There's a lot of mud. So if it's a very liquidy consistency, so it could be mitzaref to your abayim sa, even though you can't be table in it. But table by lay also like tefillah. So I have to be table in the water part, but I can use the tit to be mitzaref to the shear of the mikvah. So you see that you can have something which is mitzaref to be mashal in the shear, even though in itself I can't be table. Rashi says if you'd have the whole thing by itself, you wouldn't be able to be table. It's only mashal in the shear, but you could still be table in it. So you see, you can have something to be mitzaref, a shear to be mitzaref, and you can't in itself you can't use. Okay, here we go. You tell them beis. If you make your sukkah like a tzrif, so the classic, the way the picture they show it is like 2 walls coming like that.
No,
That's how they show. That's what my sukkah showed, but it should be round. Yes, Rashi says that it's round. It's like a kaveris. Okay, it's more like I guess like a teepee is round at top. Right, it circles to the top. It gets skinnier at top. That's this is circular on top. Okay, it's like a kaveris. It's like a honeycomb. Okay, what's the issue? There's no roof. There's no flat roof. Or you took kosher schach and you just leaned it against the wall. Again, you don't have a roof. There's no roof. So Rabbi Eliezer says it's possible in lagad because there's no roof. The Chacham say that it is kosher. You can look at it as a roof. We'll see in a Gemara in a minute. So Gemara says, Tana, if you raised up the any of this, if you raised up your hut, or you raised up or you raised up the wall that you were slanting against the wall, if you raise it off the ground by a tefach, so now I already have a wall of a tefach. So now the rest of it could be a roof. Once I have a wall, it is. Yeah, this thing is over 10 tvachim high.
Right.
Okay. Well, but once I have an area of 10 tvachim. I have an area of a tefach. So then I can make the rest of it can be considered a roof. Right? Rashi says, let's just read it. Amrin and Lovud, Bizakifa. Rashi in the Gemara. The Amrin and Lovud Bizakifa. Rashi is learning that it's a hollow area. I just raised it a tefach, even though I didn't put anything there. The Yesham tefach zakuf. The Nicker hatzrif shuhugag. So now the tzrif, the tipi, looks like a roof. The kivin sheish by shear oil bizakifa have the oil. Once I have an area, a vertical area, which is a tefach up straight, that's standing, the rest of it can be looked at as a roof. Now Taisus does point out avada, you need to have just gonna show it in this scenario here. Okay, I need to have that I need to be able to draw a square of 10 tefachim tall, right? Inside here, I need to have 10 tefachim. It needs to be 10, I need to have mechitzas of 10 tefachim in there. It needs to be able to have a box of 10 tefachim by 7 by 7. Right? It needs to go high, 10 tefachim high, and be able to go 7 tefachim across to make a sukkah.
And then the rest.
And then he's not sure if you'll be able to sleep in the rest of it or not. But for sure, you need to have an area that's 7 by 7 and 10 tvachim high in your tent to be able to be a kosher sukkah.
So we're talking about the vertical
sorry?
part of the wall. We're talking about the vertical part of the wall that doesn't go horizontal.
Where? In which case? We have two cases. We have a case of a round roof, or like a dome shaped item. It goes like that. So, and we have a case of like a triangle, like like a tent, like your classic tent. All right. So in those cases, two points. The Gemara's point that is that once Rabbi Eliezer agrees that once you have a tefach off the ground, that's straight up. If there's if the whole thing is not on a slant, but it actually starts off as straight, and then it slants, so that would be considered a gag, and he would agree that it would be a kosher sukkah. The point I'm making, Taisus makes the point in the second Taisus on the page, is that avada, you need to have an area here that inside your teepee where you can draw a square of a rectangle of 10 tvachim high by 7 tvachim across. Mm-hmm. You need to have that, and then he's the mesupik, whether according to the Rabbanan, whether you're going to be sleeping only in the middle or you can even sleep on the sides. The other scenario here is that instead of leaning my wall straight against it, I make it a little bit of an area of a tefach.
Lift it up.
This is against the wall. So against the wall, it comes. I put in some pegs that are tefach, so horizontally, and my schach is not touching the wall; it's touching the pegs that come out of tefach. So therefore, I already have a gag. My tamei d'Rabbanan. What's found in the Rabbanan that say that it's kosher? So they hold shipua oilim ka'oilim davar. The slant of a tent is like an oil, and that's also considered a oil. So even though you didn't lift anything up or you didn't move it away from the wall, it's still kosher. Now, Abaye Ashkel Rabbi Yosef the Kagani b'kilas chasanim b'sukkah. Abaye found Rabbi Yosef that he was sleeping in a tent in a kilas chasanim in the sukkah. I'm like, come on, who do you hold like? Rabbi Eliezer. You hold like Rabbi Eliezer. Remember, Rabbi Eliezer held that if it's not a roof. Rabbi Eliezer holds that you needed a tefach there to make it a roof. So he said, oh, so if you hold that it's not a roof, it's not an oil, so then you can put it into your sukkah. It has a kula also. So he said, Shafkis Rabban, Ba'adis Rabbi Eliezer, you left the Rabban, you're doing like Rabbi Eliezer? Amar le Brisa Pchatani. I have a Brisa that has it taught the opposite. Rabbi Eliezer Machshir, the Chacham are Paisel. So if Chacham are Paisel in the case where it's flush against the wall, so that means they would hold that Achilles Chasanim is not considered an oil, and I can sleep in my tent, in my sukkah. Says the Gemara, Shafkis Masnisin Ba'adis Brisa. You left a Mishnah and you're doing like a Brisa? Amar le, now you know, I know another Masnisa Yechidai. Our Mishnah is actually only a Das Yachid. The Tani we learned in a Brisa, Reb Nasan Aimer. Reb Nasan is the one who says that Reb Eliezer Paisel. So I have a Brisa that tells me that our Mishnah is really a Das Yachid, and in the other Brisa that doesn't have Reb Nasan and says the opposite, that's going like the Rabbin. So therefore, I will go like the Rabbin that would have the Chachamim saying that a Kilas Chasanim or Shipur Oilam is not a oil. Okay, now we get into mats. We mentioned it briefly a couple of blot ago, and we'll go back to mats. Zakti Mishnah. Again, this is what's very negeh for our mats. The mats that many people use now, they don't use poles, but you use bamboo mats. So what are they made for? So especially the ones that come from Home Depot, the CRC, the CRC usually publishes before.
Because it has cotton holding it together.
Well, the issue is really what is it made for?
What is it made for?
What's it made for? That's our first question.
They don't care what they made it for. Whatever people use it for.
Well, there is usually made for fencing, if I'm not mistaken.
For windows.
For fencing, as a border.
Oh, that kind of
that kind of like that's what it's usually for. The issue that we need here, the question that we need is back in the day, things were made for to lay on. That's what the machatzalos, the classic machatzalos, was made as a mattress. So let's talk about these. Machatzalos kanim, reed mat, and Rashi mentions that they're kashta. These things are actually hard. They're not very comfortable to sleep on. I guess you wouldn't use. So you would assume that the stam would not. The pashut pshat is that they wouldn't be used to sleep on. So machatzalos kanim. So the Gemara differentiates. Gedayla, if it's large, asal l'shchiva. So now, if it was specifically made to rest on, to sleep on, then mekabel stuma. Then it's mekabel stuma. Mesachim, but you can't use it for schach. L'sikach, but if it was made for schach, then mesachim. Then you can use it for schach. Ben mekabel stuma, it's not mekabel tuma. Rabbi Eliezer Aimer, achas katan of achas gedayla, whether it's small or large. Asal l'shchiva, if it's made for lying on, mekabel samei mesachim ba. L'sigach, if it's made for schach, mesachim ba mekabel. Okay. Now the Mishnah sounds good, but it has a steer in the yukim. So the Gemara is going to ask a steer. Hagufa kasha. Amrit, you said asal l'shchiva, that if you specifically made it to sleep on, then mekabel samei mesachim ba. Taima, the issue here is the asal l'shchiva, that you made it to sleep on. So what would be the stam? Hastama, it's mashma. If I didn't have intent for laying on it, then you would assume it's not. You don't use this thing to lay on. Hastama l'slichuch. Then my alternative here, stam, would be that you're using it for something else, for privacy, but not to lay on, or for shade. That's the diak of the Reisha. But the second part of the Reisha says, l'sikach, if you made it for schach, time with asal l'sikach, it sounds like it's because your intent was to use it for schach. That's why it's okay, hastama. But if you wouldn't have had that intent, then the assumption would have been that it was for shchiva. So we have a stira in stam. What is the stam? So it says, holy kasha. That's not fair. Kam bigdela, kam bigtana. Well, one's talking about a large one, one's talking about a small one. A large one, the stama is for sikoch, and a small one, the standard is for laying on. Okay, so either the Mishnah didn't mention small, it was about big, but that's what it meant. Okay, let's just skip the parentheses. The Mesilas Yesharim says to put an ema sefer. Well, let's take a look at Rabbi Eliezer. Whether it's large or small, again, same deal. It sounds like the reason is because you made it for shchiva. Then his second part of his statement was that and then you can't answer me because he's talking about both. So we have a stira in both the Reisha and the Seifa. What is the stama? What is it? What do you generally make these things for? Ela Marava. So Rava explains Pshat in the Mishnah. Everybody agrees that a large mat is generally made for schach. It's not made to lay on. I mentioned last time we spoke about this, that what's considered large and what's considered small. I forgot who it was, but some of the Masifta brought down, somebody said that small is something that would fit a person, right? a little larger than a person would lay on, because they're made for laying on. Right? So a small mat would be the size of a person, so figure 6 feet. Large would be something larger than that. Okay, so Elam Rava, Bigadayla Kuli Amalei Plegi Distam Lasikuch. Everybody agrees that we're talking about that they're made for sikuch, and therefore it's dafka if it was le shchiva. Ki pligi. So where's the machlekes? Bikatana. Tanakam saver stam katana le shchiva. Maybe Lezer saver stam katana nami le sikuch. Maybe Lezer holds that even a katana stama, being that they're hard, these are not things that are made for schach. Let's just finish how he reads the Mishnah. This is how you read the Mishnah. Taima, the reason for that is that asal shchiva hastama. But if he did it stam, so it says it's a stam is as if it was made for sichuch, and therefore it would be okay. But the Rebbe Lazar skip the parentheses that achas chlan v'achsdel sama kasher l'sikuch. And Rebbe Lazar know that in both scenarios you can assume the stam is for schach and not for shchiva, and every dafka need to have in mind to make it for shchiva to something not to be able to use. Okay, Shalom and Shkoyach. We'll see you tomorrow night at Mitzvah Shem. We did it.
Shkoyach.
Good night.